Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning for another Tai Talk, as we like to call them. This morning, we're going to be talking about LTL. So this is a great webinar for anybody who is currently running an LTL brokerage or anybody who's trying to beef up on their LTL movings for revenue opportunities, or even anybody who's just considering starting an LTL division for their brokerage. We definitely see a lot of brokerages out there who do a lot of truckload and are missing out on some of their LTL opportunities just because it's nuanced and they don't know much about it. But we've got an expert on today. Ben from LogisticsFox is going to tell us a little bit about his background and his process using Tai. But in general, Ben has had about, I want to say, 2,000% growth in the last 7 years or so with his brokerage. And so it'll be really cool to hear about his agency hierarchy and how he's built that into Tai, but also how he's recruited agents to grow the business and some of the technology that he's adopted to drive the business forward. So that's where we'll be going with this today. So for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Sean. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Tai Software. Today, go ahead, we'll have Rob Henritze introduce himself.
Yeah. Hey, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Rob Henritze. I head up the sales engineering function here at Tai, and really interested here in connecting with Ben and talking through some of these questions, learning more about his business. I'll also have the opportunity to show you guys some of the features that come up in conversation directly in the platform. So
awesome. Thank you, Rob. And before we introduce the star of the show, being Ben here, who we're interviewing, for anybody who doesn't know, we did a case study with Ben, and that's available here on the webinar. There's a link that'll post toward the end of the webinar where you can download that. But today we're just going to be digging into those, basically the case study and the questions that we had asked Ben. But Rob's here to show us some of the features within Tai that we're talking about. So I guess without further ado, Ben, can I have you introduce yourself and maybe just tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name's Ben Fauver, president, founder of LogisticsFox. So a little bit about my background. I had been with LTL carriers prior to starting LogisticsFox. So that's really kind of been my specialty. LogisticsFox started 10 years ago. We started using Tai about 9 years ago. And it was a different name at that time, but still a great brand. And we've really just, because of that focus on LTL, we were able to develop relationships with LTL carriers and continue over the course of years. And putting that primary focus on the LTL has helped us also build our truckload division as well. But we're still largely, in terms of shipment count, mostly LTL. But yeah, we celebrated 10 years in February, and as you mentioned, grown quite a bit. We were very fortunate last year, while others were saying they were declining. We were still growing, not quite as much as we had in prior years, but we still were growing. And I think that was largely due to the focus on LTL. It kind of allowed us to balance things out.
Yeah, that's it's funny because I've said on a bunch of webinars last year, like, hey, even if you're flat, in terms of growth right now, like you're doing good, like just hold on. Like some of the brokerages out there, we saw obviously some close. It hasn't been an easy market for brokers, but you guys have obviously done a great job in terms of just capitalizing on, any of the LTL revenue. And it's pretty cool to see some brokerages that are, you kind of go the opposite direction of what we normally see, because there's a lot of truckload brokers out there, and then they try to dabble in the LTL side. And in your case, you guys have really grown as an LTL brokerage, which is really cool to see. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about what are some of the common operational challenges that LTL brokers tend to deal with? Not necessarily what you guys deal with, but you've been around a long time. I'm sure you've talked to plenty of LTL brokers. Can you kind of tell the audience about just common challenges?
Yeah, I mean, the most common challenge with LTL is the volume that you have to do, and in comparison to truckload. But Tai makes that actually pretty easy to manage. We've also set ourselves up on the LTL side to be more kind of designed like an LTL carrier, where we have different operations that handle different specific things. And time makes that easy to do as well. But defined accounting roles, accounting department, defined customer service for LTL, defined sales, and then also from the management layer, we'll dig in deeper into specific LTL needs for those customers, which has allowed us to be more successful in that.
Yeah, it's because on the truckload side, you might end up with like an average, the actual profit you get off of like net profit off an account might be off of a load anyway, might be like anywhere from $100 to $300, $400. But in LTL, it's probably like the average is probably closer to what, like maybe 30 to 50 per shipment.
Probably closer to 50. Now, that's just because of shipments that are multi-pallets. On the smaller end, you're looking at significantly less than that, but on the average, roughly.
Yeah. And so for anybody who doesn't know, obviously, like you can't be doing the way that you do truckload in terms of like tons of check calls or tons of manual tracking processes and things like that. It really has to be heavily automated if you're going to do LTL well, because you have to be able to do volume. Because people worry about the margin, but if you're doing a ton of shipments and it doesn't take the automation allows you to not have a significant amount of labor cost, then it almost doesn't matter what the margin percentage is, because if you're making $50 per shipment, but you barely have to touch them. That's kind of the magic of LTL. I'm making it sound easier than it is, but like automation on the LTL side versus the truckload side is very significant. It's been like basically with LTL, automation's the name of the game. If you're not automating those shipments, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to be profitable, right?
Well, not only just to be profitable, but to not be running around with your hair, pulling your hair out. And from early on, just collecting pros every morning prior to Tai would take us hours in the morning because we would have to call each individual carrier, confirm that they had actually picked up, ask what the pro number was, and get that information. Whereas now with Tai, a lot of the pro numbers actually automatically go into the system. It automatically moves in transit. There are some that are the smaller carriers where we have to do a little bit of due diligence, but I still makes that a simpler process. And I would say that 99% of pros we have before 8 a.m. And then there's 1% that still take a little bit of time, mostly just because the carrier hasn't billed the shipment or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're doing it, and we do talk to some brokers that are doing it the old school way, where they're literally logging into the carrier's website regularly, as opposed to making it so it's really unsustainable from a scalability standpoint if you're not pulling all. And every carrier is different, so like we might integrate a certain way to get those pro numbers, or to make sure that the dispatch goes, or to pull in the pricing. It might be a slightly different integration for each carrier, but the important thing is making sure that it's all in one place. You're managing all of LTL without having to jump around to all those carrier websites. Because I think that would be like you said, you pulling your hair out if that's the process.
Yep.
Yeah. So kind of digging in, I guess, a little bit more to how you guys are using Tai. Which features would you say have been the most helpful when it comes to dealing with the day-to-day challenges?
I mean, there's a couple things that have been added over the years. I would say one of the big things is actual the Tai automation, as you guys refer to it. I'm a big risk adverse person. I like to avoid problems before they happen. So a lot of our volume shipments are available on through Tai. Customers can quote them and schedule them there. And we're able to put in some specific notes in the system that help prevent some problems. But there are some things that can be missed. So one of the things that we created was automation. Whenever there's a volume shipment that is created, specifically when it's 6 pallets or more, it automatically sends an email to our operations just to confirm that it's fits within those volume rules, and that could be potentially an LTL rate happened to show up for whatever reason, which we've done a lot of things to limit that, but it does happen from time to time. It allows us to prevent that situation from happening because those types of issues are big problems. When someone ships 10 pallets as an LTL shipment, all of a sudden you get $3,000, $4,000 bill than the 1,000 that you were expecting. Those have largely been avoided completely since we've been able to implement that. And then the other thing would be occasionally some carriers will, if you schedule a shipment from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., some carriers will automatically move through the system and be dispatched. Some of them you have to be a little bit more specific. If it's 10 a.m., you have to put after 10 a.m. in order to do that. So we have an automation where it'll automatically send an email to customer service if it's been rejected for whatever reason, and then they can handle scheduling it from there or address the customer if it's needed, so that we see as few missed pickups as possible.
Yeah. And we're going to have Rob actually bring up the system now and kind of talk through some of this stuff. But the goal here in terms of what Ben's talking about, like our goal when we're helping LTL brokers service their customers is like exactly what Ben said. We want to get you ahead of potential problems. So there's actually a question in the chat here from Maverick about rebills. And so we can kind of address that too. But when the worst thing that really can happen, I guess not the worst thing, but one of the things that's really challenging in an LTL brokerage is it gets quoted wrong, like you mentioned, right? Where the customer typed it in and maybe they just missed a detail too, or they just like, they're not as versed as your team would be or your agents would be at LTL. So maybe they just book it incorrectly. And if you don't find out right away, or like if you don't stop it from happening, or you don't find out right away and let them know, then that bill coming way later causes a lot of friction with the client, right? And then in some cases, I think a lot of brokerages will just eat it, where they just like, hey, it was only $20, let's just eat it, but like just to prevent the friction with the customer. But if you do that too much, you're losing quite a bit of money instead of just preventing it or being able to get an update on the front end of it. So Rob, why don't we have you kind of walk through some, like just a common LTL example, and we'll tie this back to what Ben's been telling us about.
Yeah, we can hop in there. Maybe just before we hop in, I'd love to kind of double back to a couple of things you said, Ben. So you mentioned that you guys have those workflow automations that you created for the volume LTL shipments that you do, and then for just making sure that you adhere to pickup windows for carriers. So I that represents a good opportunity to talk about some features that we've rolled out. I guess how are you guys handling those before we rolled out workflow automation? Was that
constantly scouring through shipments, making sure that really that's what it was. I would look through the shipments quite often, and doing this allowed me to turn that over to someone else to actually handle rather than me going through it.
That's awesome. That's exactly why we developed that, and it's glad to hear that you guys are doing that. So for everything that isn't going volume, or you're just essentially allowing the customer to book those directly with the carriers, but then if it is a volume LTL shipment, you're going to hit somebody's desk, have them review it quickly, and then dispatch it.
Yep.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, a couple of things that we could look at here in the system. We could hop into an LTL example and then maybe talk a little bit about some of the workflow automation tools that Ben mentioned here. A couple of different places we could go to. So we could, of course, look at the ability for the system to create LTL shipments from email. That's certainly a capability. Just to create one though, if I head up to the shipments tab, create shipment standard form, we'll build one out and we'll talk about a few of the tools that we have in the system to make this process fast and easy, while also doing what we can to prevent rebills early and often.
Yeah.
Which,
that tends to be the biggest friction for LTL brokers, is the one that we hear most often before they come to Tai, is they're really trying to solve the rebill situation. I don't know that they ever go away. Ben can tell us, but to significantly reduce them is a huge business improvement.
Yeah, I mean, really, it comes down to LTL carriers can be a little finicky about certain things. I see a question regarding appointment times in the chat there. I don't fill out the delivery side in terms of hours or windows. I don't fill that out at all. I leave that open. LTL carriers assume that a delivery is anywhere between 8 and 5. So if you put specific times in there, they might assume that means it's has to be an appointment. So I just leave those times off completely. If they do have, the consignee has a close time of 4, instead of putting a range, I'll just put closes at 4 p.m. Rather than a time window. So Maverick, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Thanks for the added color there. So Rob, go ahead and walk us through just a common LTL, like creating a shipment and some of the fail safes that we put in place here.
Yeah, so we're going to start off by selecting a customer in the system, and then the staff user that will send updates to as the shipment progresses through the statuses. References is up here at the top, and coming in very short order will be the ability for Tai customers to actually create purely custom references, and then all of the validations that go along with that. So look out for that. That's going to come out here very shortly. We'll start with I already entered our origin and our destination address. But this is actually kind of the first touch point that we're going to engage some tools to cut down on rebills. One of those being the Shiplify integration that we're proudly offering here as part of the package. What this will do is for any address that I enter into the system, we're going to make a call out to the Shiplify service, and we're going to go ahead and notify the user if we are bumping up against any kind of limited access scenario here. And so in the case of the address that I entered, this saved address that I was able to pull up really quickly here just by searching off the company name, you can see that we are dealing with a commercial address. So we're not looking at a residential delivery surcharge or anything like that. However, Shiplify is not aware that this location has a dock. And A1 confidence there indicates that within their system, an LTL carrier has visited that location, and billed for that accessorial. So what we're going to do in Tai is we're actually going to go ahead and add that for you here automatically because of that A1 confidence there. And so whether we're talking about a customer that's entering this in the portal, whether this is a user on your team that's creating the shipment, this could be an email request that comes over from a customer. We can validate it right there in line when we're looking at an address. This is a great way to make sure that we're not dealing with limited access scenarios.
Yeah, and that's our first line of defense when it comes to just you're typing in an address. That tends to be one where if you're an agent that's not super experienced on LTL, or maybe the customer's entering it themselves, they might not know to check the box that a lift gate's needed, and they might not really even be thinking about it. They might just be trying to get a quick quote and just blowing right past some of the small details here. And what we want to prevent is them from getting one quote and then later, because these LTL carriers, they're not gonna wait for your approval when they're there to pick it up, right? Like if a lift gate's needed or something like that, they're just gonna do it, and you're gonna get a second bill or an updated bill.
And typically it's signed for on the POD. They'll mark it. The driver will mark that or on the bill of lading also the lift gate was used, and then there's really not much room for fighting it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yes. Your choices are then you call the customer right away and let them know, or sometimes in some cases, folks with other TMS systems, you don't really find out until you get that bill from them sometimes 30 days later, and now your customer's like forgotten about it completely, and they're just seeing you hitting them with an extra bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly. And so when we're looking at this address as well, the other options that we have are going to be taking a look at our map view. So you'll have that here front and center. You can of course drop your person there onto the sidewalk. Take a look at the location that we're picking up from. So obviously not looking good for dock support there. Our destination here is, however, a commercial address with a dock, right? So you can see that. And then when we look at some of the other fields here, we talk about contacts, email addresses, all of that kind of stuff. If you enter that, you can add it to your favorites. One of the questions in the chat is around the pickup windows here. And this is just something that you can save against that location that you enter. So obviously you can change it, but you can save those facility hours along with any notes or instructions here. Notes typically being internal, instructions typically being more external. Scroll down here. There's our lift gate. All your accessorials here, kind of your quick add accessorials. These are going to be mode specific. You can let us know which ones you need there. Our onboarding support teams, they can help you with any of that configuration. And then we're going to select our commodity from the list of commodities that we've created for this particular customer. This is going to be another opportunity for us to look to cut down on rebills. So when we talk about getting the classes entered correctly here, we can go ahead and load those up for our customer in MFC codes. We can make sure dimensions are required and classes required on every shipment. And we do have the built-in freight class estimator as well. So we'll pull the PCF based on the dimensions that are entered, and we'll give you a density class there as well. So, if we're not sure, not comfortable, at least we have an idea of where we need to start on shipments that are entered here. But ideally, we're getting those products and quantities loaded in the system here.
Yeah, a couple things to help avoid challenges is making sure that your customer is actually measuring from the longest point to the longest point. That's the most common reclass issue is, the pallet is 48 by 40, but it's got an overhang of, 2 inches and taking it from 125 to 175. And that's a pretty painful difference.
Absolutely. A few other things, and Ben, I'd love your commentary on this, but some things we talk about a lot are, identifying overlink scenarios, carriers. If we do enter like a 96-inch pallet here, the TMS is going to automatically add an overlink accessorial, that based on whatever is entered here at the bottom. I guess any thoughts or comments on managing overlink, I guess, for the team?
Well, it doesn't do it if you put it in the width. You got to put it in the length. So make sure you're doing that. And then keep an eye on linear footage when, if you're putting in multiple pallets that are 96 inches long, you eat up that linear footage pretty quickly. So, and then it becomes a volume shipment.
Yep. And Matt, to answer your question, we do have the ability to save addresses at the we should be able to save it at the organization level, so you can create like site-wide if you need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and before Rob goes to rated here, just to kind of point out the few things, because we're just talking about a shipment entry, right? Like it's almost like it's a little bit of a dry topic, but if you are dealing with regular headaches on the LTL side, or maybe you're trying to beef up on LTL, but you don't necessarily know how to avoid the rebills. So the Shipify integration helps us with the location and limited access and what's needed at the pickup and the destination, but then also making sure that the class calculator helps you out, make sure you get in the right class. If you don't already have the NMFC number, you can save the product in the product catalog for the client. And so hopefully, that's kind of the gold standard. So you never, if you save it the way it's supposed to be, then it's never going to be wrong. But then even if you have an overlink, then you forget to check that box. We're gonna prevent that from becoming something that you rate one way without the over dimension and then get a second bill on, right? So these are the biggest headaches that I hear from LTL brokers is like, it's almost more trouble than it's worth if you don't know how to reduce the rebills. If you're just constantly getting rebills with almost every shipment, it really becomes easy to go, we're just not going to do LTL. And then you're opening the door for another broker to potentially come in if you're doing mostly truckload, right? You don't want to be turning away opportunities when somebody's coming to you, especially when, there's some pretty easy ways to prevent that.
Yeah, through experience of working with customers, a lot of times the pallets are different sized. They will, we've got a lot of customers that will have a variety of classes. Same NMFC, but different subcategories, making them, 65, 75, or 77.5, or 85, whatever. What I typically do is I'll fill in the number of pallets, pieces, weight. I'll put in the dimensions, and then I have saved each of those different categories. And when I save the product, say it's insulation, it's a common one that we see, density based, right? I'll put in the pounds. When I save the commodity, I save the pounds per cubic foot range. That way I can very easily select the correct class with the correct subcategory, preventing certain problems. Because there are some carriers that are more heavy on the density than they are the actual class. There are some that are sticklers on the NMFC, and then there are some that are sticklers on the density class, and then there are some. Well, we have one carrier. It's a little frustrating. We do have a note in the system for it, but one carrier that you have to put in the correct NMFC. Otherwise, it'll quote based on the NMFC entered, resulting in potentially the wrong class. So,
yeah.
Curious, Ben, do you find your team or leveraging the tariff lane rule feature, like for linear feed and for cubic capacity rules?
So that goes into the avoiding problems. There's a lot of carriers where we've limited, their LTL is, for the most part, like the kind of across the board standard is 10,000 pounds. Some of them will do a little bit more, but we'll set that parameter, preventing that rate from coming up if it is actually over their maximum weight. Same with linear footage. There are some caveats to that where if we were to limit it too much, you would not be able to see certain pricing that would technically be okay. But we try to put notes in the system that will help identify those particular areas.
Yeah. So just for the sake of kind of moving into a couple other features that we want to make sure we're talking through here, Rob, do you want to finish this scenario up, and then we'll dovetail into, I want to hear a little bit more about Ben's experience growing the business and recruiting agents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and run our rates here, keeping in mind some of those features that we've mentioned. Again, the ability to put rules in place to handle the linear feed, cubic capacity on the tariff level is certainly an important feature in Tai. Ben, do you find yourself leveraging heavily the pricing notes feature for customers to communicate some of those additional?
The pricing what feature?
Pricing notes on the tariff there.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I've been referring to. We have notes on every single tariff. Mostly just like the odd rules that certain carriers have. Everyone has, just like every customer has certain carriers that they've had bad experiences with. LTL carriers have certain products that they've had bad experiences with, so they have particular rules for those products or size shipments, things of that nature. So we try to put in some of those items that we see as most common in making a mistake with and using them.
Excellent. So from here, we'll just simply select a rate. So we'll choose our carrier. The tariff source that we're getting that rate from is going to be listed below. So we can find that, of course, in our rate section at the top here. We have our terminal info, transit time, our service level, liability coverage, our supplemental insurance listed out here. And then if we hover, we're going to see the full breakdown of the margin for the particular rate that we're looking at here. Again, the pricing notes field is right here, and that's going to be something that you can configure and control. And again, it's helpful to communicate a lot of really useful information to both your internal team and then also to your customers that are using the customer portal, right? You can give them the ability to see that stuff. So we'll choose our carrier, roll it down here to the bottom. It'll break down the rate for me fully, and then we'll save that.
So if you've never obviously used Tai and you're thinking about leveraging it for LTL, so those are some of the key areas we use to help reduce mistakes. I definitely see questions from current clients, and just so you know, anybody who is a current client watching us go through some of the basic stuff that you already know how to do, we will reach out to you directly and answer any questions that you have. We've got your information, and so any suggestions and things like that, we can address those after the webinar. But Ben, I would love to dig into your experience with, as you grew the business. Obviously, you had to go about recruiting agents and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience in terms of how you went about it? What makes folks actually want to come and be an agent for LogisticsFox? Because obviously you've attracted quite a few. Can you expand on some of that?
Yeah. So when we changed to Tai, one of my biggest concerns was user interface for both back office and front office. And I felt that Tai, for me personally, was the simplest and easiest to understand, which is not only important for sales reps, but important for customers as well. Very simple and straightforward. But in terms of actually recruiting both direct reps and agencies, is utilizing the hierarchy, and that's allowed not only as we've grown. I can keep things separate from other sales reps, meaning one sales rep can't necessarily see another sales rep's accounts, which I think is important, and that sense of security for that sales agent. But it also allows for me to have team leaders, so I can have a hierarchy of a manager and then their sales reps below, which works both for our direct sales reps and managers, but also agencies who potentially have more than one rep that sells for that agency.
Yeah, that makes sense. So because at your level, you're making it so that your sales reps are seeing only what you want them to see, and then not necessarily being able to see the customer base or the things that an agent might be doing. But then even they have that capability to create their own permissions, right? So you can, yeah. So what in terms of like setting up guardrails and things like that, is there anything that you would suggest when it comes to, because obviously you guys have done a great job with this, but like when somebody comes to you and they're thinking about like, yeah, I would like to be an agent for you, what are some of the common things that they are worried about when they're just basically almost trying to interview you if they're going to bring that book over to you? What does some of that look like?
Yeah, I mean, some of the most common concerns with an agent is, how the accounting portion works. Are they going to be notified of certain things? And we largely allow them to make a decision based on, their experience with that particular customer. But their accounts are going to be protected, and we have certain rules that are totally unrelated to Tai, which is kind of the industry standard that I've heard of, 3 months. If it's active, it stays with that particular agent. But the biggest concern is that, nobody else is calling them. There's other brokers out there. If someone becomes dormant for a period of time, then it goes into a sales funnel and anybody's calling on it, and they've got multiple people hunting after the same business. We've also made we don't necessarily want to be what I would say like a mega broker. We would like to, maintain a family feel. And that means, somewhat limiting how many people we have calling in a particular area.
Yeah, that makes sense. You guys are, you're not running that model where it's like your whole, business is just marketing for new agents. You're actually trying to bring on folks that you feel like you can trust. They fit the culture overall, and they can work with your team. Does your team end up, like your internal team, do they end up handling a lot of the back office functionality, or do you parse that out so that each agent kind of handles their own like accounting functionality and things like that?
Yeah. So accounting is always done by us. That's the one thing that we don't let go of. But we've had people who we would call it like an agent or agency model. Agent would be someone that relies on our team, whether that's they have a direct contact and support for LTL quoting and scheduling, or they're reaching out directly to our customer service team, and whether that's tracking or any other types of challenges they're having with a particular shipment. And we've had a lot of success with that because sales reps often really just want to sell, and they can focus on that and grow. They end up making more, even though they may be getting a slightly less of a percentage. And then we also have agencies where they're able to actually quote truckload themselves and book truckload themselves, as well as LTL. And they get a slightly higher amount, but they don't get as much back office support from us.
Yeah. It's funny how different sales reps, different personalities, like some folks do actually want to run more like, manage their customers and not just do the sales side. And then some salespeople think they want that until it starts happening. And then they're like,
right,
please take this off my plate and just let me sell. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what we saw during COVID was a lot of those agency type models, and I'm sure it's improved. It's not the same, but one of the reasons why we had some success is a lot of those agencies that were handling a lot of their own stuff were really unprepared for all the challenges during COVID, whether that be late deliveries, missed pickups, things of that nature. And it became very challenging for that agency model to really kind of keep up with the demands of their customers. Whereas our sales team having support, we were able to accomplish getting all of those needs taken care of for those customers, that's when we saw, our biggest growth was probably 21, 22. And it was largely because of that service model that we were providing.
Yeah. That's good for folks to know, because then you went from that where it was like market was insane back then. It was a little unpredictable, but also there were a lot of folks that, like yourself, that structured it in a way where they were able to take advantage of. I guess that's the wrong way to say it, but you were able to capitalize on some of what was going on during that time period, and then to see you also continuing, like you said at the beginning of the webinar, continuing to grow even through. I mean, we're in a completely different market than 2022, right? So, yeah, to see you guys keep growing is pretty impressive. Rob, if you don't mind, then kind of going into like how Ben utilizes Tai for what he's talking about in terms of like a hierarchy and agency model. We get a lot of questions about this when we're demoing, because it's not uncommon for an LTL broker to want to recruit agents and grow in that model. So can you maybe show our hierarchy builder?
Yeah, certainly. And maybe as we get into that too, I'd love to hear, Ben, as you talk about recruiting agents and building an agent network, how does technology play into your recruitment strategy? Is it helpful to you to be able to offer, I guess, how do you guys leverage it in that way?
I mean, it's obviously very helpful having the technology. But for the agencies, they're able to access all of our carriers that we're already set up with. They can access the data for, what on the truckload side, what our average cost is in particular lanes. They can see those things and hit the ground running. But then not only just that, the other concern is, tracking commissions. Have I been paid on this? And through some of the sales reporting, they're able to easily see, when they're going to be paid on something. Given them, obviously, the agency, agencies or agents, they're business owners, and they may be small business owners, but they're business owners, and they want to be able to see that data, and they're easily able to in Tai. And not only that, but I feel as though some of I don't want to give any names, but there's one in particular that I was concerned about us being able to compete against in terms of what was available, but also how the system felt. And I feel that this is, the only product out there that really kind of competes with that in that type of model, whether it's agencies or direct reps. They're able to access any of the information that they need, that they have access to, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, so the small business owner doesn't feel like they don't have to feel like they're limited in the tech that they're getting when they choose to do business with you. Because to your point, they're partnering with you, right? They don't want to see themselves as like, we work for you. It's a partnership. It's mutually beneficial, and you're giving them good technology with a lot of visibility, right? So you've got visibility into where they might need help from you, but they've got full visibility on their whole business and what they want to see.
Exactly. And we find this all the time with talking to customers. It's definitely an advantage for our platform. So not only the ability to manage and support agents and agencies, but also for, multiple offices and, kind of like you mentioned before, Ben, where you have, sales reps that you want to have designated into, maybe a particular territory or particular customers that they serve. Within Tai, if you look at your LSP tab here, you have your organization, which reflects the top level, reflects the top level organization in the hierarchy here. And then what we do is we build out the lower level organizations that roll up underneath it. Within those organizations, if we take a look here, you have the ability to, the folks that are the staff users that are built out at this agent office level, for example, it's going to have the ability to create customers. There's going to be multiple users potentially there. Rates can be granted down from the top level organization to the lower level organizations. And so that's how LogisticsFox, for example, is able to provide or give access to those LTL rates to those lower levels in the hierarchy, while at the same time, they have the ability to, in some cases, plan and manage their own truckloads as if they're completely independent businesses, with all the back office rolling up to the top level in the hierarchy. So definitely a powerful tool within the system here in order to segment out parts of your business and give visibility where you need it, while also still providing the control and the back office functions that you're typically going to see in an agency model.
Yeah. Simplicity is key. We don't want somebody like Ben to have to feel like it's overcomplicated when he's doing a good job recruiting the agents that he wants, and then setting up permissions. We don't want it to feel like cumbersome or like there's no way to do it, or he's got to draw it over here and then just kind of manage it outside the system. Our goal is to make it super simple to recruit those agents, set them up, set the right permissions for them, and then be able to obviously feed those rates downward, but also spot issues where maybe you can be helping them out and stopping some of the common errors from coming into play.
Maybe another question too on this one. I'd be curious, and probably, we could have connected on this before too, but I'd be curious to hear, have you had agents that you've onboarded that have remarked favorably about, the experience in Tai and the technology that you guys are able to set them up in? Has that been something that you
I would like to say yes to make you feel better, but most of the people that we've worked with, they may have left an LTL carrier or something along those lines. There's a couple that worked for other brokers prior, and they do like it, but they're also kind of not a group that likes to sing praises very much. So
Yeah.
Maybe if you're not hearing a lot of negative things,
not hearing complaints.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe that's what you're looking for.
Which is what we know as a TMS provider. We know that if basically no news is really good news, right? Like if you're not hearing anything negative, then that means it's it feels like you've got everything you need. That's table stakes to get the job done, right? And then because we would hear it if there was a bunch of complaints coming from your agents, I'm sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So Rob, anything more on this before we kind of pivot into, I'd love to hear Ben's experience on support and things like that, but anything else you want to show before we, conclude sort of the demoing section of this?
The hierarchy is pretty self-explanatory. It's really just being able to build out those settings and, give access where you need it. And, everybody is at that lower level is going to have essentially their own TMS with, some settings granted down, maybe some tool access granted down. And it lends itself beautifully for agent models and multi-office setups.
Yeah. Before we pivot into talking about support and your experience with our support team, Ben, you've obviously been super successful in recruiting the right agents that you feel fit your organization. Is there anything else you want to say about what's made it so appealing for some of these really good agents to come and want to work with you?
I think we pretty well covered it. But the big thing is for us personally is we genuinely want to see the success of those sales reps. So we do a lot to help them. And we'll continue to do that till we get where we're trying to go.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You guys have obviously done a really good job with it. So I'm sure brokers that are on here that are trying to figure out how to scale, I'm sure. And then if you're an agent on here, obviously LogisticsFox is a great place to potentially do some business with. But kind of getting into, I want to ask you about customer service only because it tends to be an area where some of the legacy TMS providers on truckload, or even ones that don't compete specifically in our space, the legacy products don't necessarily put a high emphasis on customer service. Some of them even charge every time you reach out to them for anything. You're getting a bill for it. Can you share a little bit about your experience working with Tai over the last 9 years from a customer service perspective?
Sorry, I just couldn't get over the getting charged every time you reach out to them. I would probably never reach out to anybody. But we've worked closely with the support team over the years. They've always, generally most things are answered with one email and we're done. And it's handled quickly. There are some things where we've had projects, things that we were interested in implementing, whether it was adding a tariff for a carrier or something else. Throughout the entire process was being updated and let know what was going on, where things stood. It was great communication. I never was like, what's going on with this? It was, weekly updates or whatever. As we were talking before we were on, some of them have become, good friends over time, and they've been promoted within Tai, and great to see their success.
Yeah, we're a big promote from within organization. Those folks that work in support, we're lucky. We've got some really hard workers, and it's always a great place to promote from, because if you can do support really well within a tech organization, you probably know the product really well, and it creates a lot of opportunities. And yeah, because you were working with us back when the support team was smaller, and I think all of the support reps that were titled as support when you started with us, literally all of them have moved on to the product side or the professional services side and things like that, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Well, just given, obviously a couple minutes left here on the webinar. If anybody does have questions, throw them in. We'll try to get to a few of them. But anything else that you want to say, Ben, in terms of just your overall experience working with Tai, or just anything that you think the market should know about what's going on in the industry?
In terms of working with Tai, if you are on the fence, I would say go for it. It's been a great experience. We went from $1 million in revenue to we'll do 25 million this year, and it's largely been due to Tai and its functionality and the support that we've gotten from the company, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're an organization that obviously has done a good job planning out how you're going to grow and then rolling with the punches. And it's good to be able to partner with you, because I feel like we were saying earlier, tech really just, you don't want it to stop you from whatever you're envisioning in terms of growth. We just want to be there to support it, right? And that way you just, like, tech's not an issue. You get to, because you can't give us all of the credit, although I'd love to take it. But obviously you guys have done a great job. Like, a business that's not set up well, that has good tech, isn't going to grow. But we want to enable your team to be able to sprint if you want to at times, or pivot with any different industry change that's happening, from the 2022 market to the market today. We just want to be able to be there for an organization like yourself, who's growth minded, and you want to keep moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think you've continued to add things that I wasn't necessarily asking for. I've been busy trying to grow my business, and regularly you guys are adding things that benefit me without me even having to look into what I'm missing could benefit me.
Right. Yeah. That's what we always want to be. Is we have a lot of customers that come to us just asking questions about, like, what's the next cool, especially on the truckload side, but like, what's the next cool tool to integrate with and things like that. Just because the industry is just constantly changing. Rob, before we wrap up, anything else you want to add in here to go along with kind of the closeout that Ben gave?
No, I really appreciate hearing your feedback on the features, leveraging the workflow automation. And in addition to all that we do with our LTL automation features, that's really the direction that we're trying to focus the application on. It's just to create more efficiency for our customers and to continue to deliver solutions in areas where, of course, for things that you guys are asking for, but also the innovation side, where we're looking at, the market, where our customers are, where they're going, where they want to go. How can we help solve a lot of these challenges for you? That's what we're hoping to continue to deliver.
Yeah. So Ben, where can folks find you if they want to maybe do some business with you or talk with you?
Our website is LogisticsFox.com, but they can always reach me. My email, ben@LogisticsFox.com. And if we didn't get to some of your questions, feel free to reach out to me. I see a few of those that I'd like to answer. I see a Christian asked, customer says class 70, but it's dimming out to 125. Would using the NMFC help eliminate the reclass issue? With something that's 125, dimming out to 125, but the customer is saying it's 70, probably not. It's probably not actually class 70. It's very unlikely that it would have that disparity. But there could be potentially an NMFC that fits that. And yes, if that is truly the actual class, then yeah, that would help prevent that issue.
Any other questions in there that you would like to answer? Because we don't have to rush off.
No. It went away. It just disappeared.
No worries. So We also grabbed those questions so that we can reach out to folks directly. So we have an admin on the back end that's bringing those questions in and compiling them so that we can reach out to folks that are current Tai customers with questions. And then if you're not a Tai customer, hopefully this really helped you if you were trying to either make a decision. I mean, honestly, even if you're not looking at Tai, which I hope you are, but if you're just thinking about maybe expanding your LTL brokerage, hopefully this was really helpful to you. But if you do want to get a demo of Tai, go to tai-software.com. We have a handout up here if anybody wants to see that. That is the case study that we did with Ben, and we also have a few other handouts. But if you'd like to get a demo, hit us up. Maybe it'll be me and Rob that actually do the demo for you. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Ben, thank you again for being willing to do this in a busy broker life. Giving us an hour to go over this has been awesome. So thank you, and thank you for your partnership. And Rob, thanks for joining so that you could show us a little bit of the DMS.
Absolutely. Really appreciate the time, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.